Can you pull yourself away for once? Your head is filled with this stuff.
It's just that it's so much more interesting
Then what?
than life.
The Sopranos has never been afraid of exploring dreams. From Isabella to Mayhem, David Chase consistently uses dreams as a window into Tony Soprano's subconscious. But no episode pushes that idea further than Season 5, Episode 11, titled The Test Dream. For many viewers, this episode feels completely disconnected from reality. Characters appear and disappear, and dead people sit at dinner tables. Tony wanders through bizarre scenarios that seem impossible to understand. But beneath all the surreal imagery lies a surprisingly simple truth. Tony Soprano knows exactly what he has to do. He's just not prepared to do it. The episode begins with Tony learning about the murder of Angelo Guarepi. Almost immediately, his thoughts turn to his cousin, Tony Blundetto. Angelo was Tony B's closest friend from prison, and Tony instinctively knows that his cousin is going to retaliate. The problem is that Tony has spent the entire season protecting Tony B. He's given him opportunities and bent every single rule in the Mafia handbook to make up for his past guilt. And now those decisions are about to drag New Jersey into a war with New York. The 20-minute dream sequence begins after Tony checks into a hotel. He begins drinking heavily and sleeps with a prostitute, and then receives confirmation that Angelo is dead. From that moment onward, his subconscious takes over. The title itself is the first clue. A test dream is a common anxiety dream where someone shows up for an exam completely unprepared. David Chase has explained that the title refers to this exact kind of anxiety. Tony is facing a test and he isn't prepared for it. That test is Tony Blundetto, and the only way to pass this test is by killing him before Phil Leotardo starts a war. Throughout the dream, Tony encounters dead people everywhere. Various figures from his past drift in and out of scenes. Death is constantly surrounding him. This reflects Tony's growing awareness that his choices do actually have consequences. Every dead face represents another reminder of where his life will ultimately lead. No matter where he turns, mortality follows him. One of the most interesting moments occurs when Tony finds himself in a therapy session with Gloria Trillo. Gloria repeats ideas previously associated with Dr. Melfi, including comparisons between therapy and childbirth.
You know, sometimes what happens in here is like taking a shit.
Yes, okay. Although I prefer to think of it more like childbirth.
Trust me. It's like taking a shit. Sometimes what happens here is like taking a shit.
I prefer to think of it as more like childbirth.
Maybe it is more like childbirth. You tell me.
I don't have any children. I died too young.
I think this scene reveals something Tony has never fully admitted to himself. He wants the emotional connection he has with Melfi, but he also wants the passion and excitement he found in women like Gloria. The problem is that Tony's life has conditioned him to believe he can have both without sacrifices. This dream is exposing that fantasy. Another recurring element is observation. At multiple points, Tony almost seems to be watching his own dreams unfold through a television screen. It's as if he's both participant and spectator. This could potentially be reflecting his growing paranoia. Not only is the FBI watching him, but now so is New York. For a man who's built his entire identity around control, Tony is increasingly feeling like someone being observed rather than someone in charge. We then enter dinner at Vesuvio's. Tony's teeth begin to fall out. This is one of the oldest anxiety symbols in psychology and dream interpretation. I think this very well exposes Tony's deep-rooted fear on how he's viewed by other people, and his teeth falling out highlights people around him are beginning to notice this facade, and slowly but surely are uncovering the ugly monster beneath the mask. His family is there, and so is Finn's. Everyone is watching. Tony's greatest fear doesn't seem to be physical danger, but humiliation. The fear of being exposed. The fear that everyone will see his weakness. The fear that the powerful image he spent his entire life creating could suddenly collapse. Even the conversation itself points towards death. Dead men sit alongside living family members. Annette Bening asks Tony how long he can stay. It's a simple question, but in the context of the dream it sounds almost existential. How much time does Tony actually have left? How much longer can he continue living this way? The dream repeatedly blurs the line between life and death because Tony himself is beginning to sense how fragile that line really is. The dream's most bizarre moment may be the scene at the urinal with Finn's father. The dialogue is awkward, almost absurd, but dreams aren't logical, they're symbolic. Between them hangs a sign instructing employees to wash their hands before returning to work. The placement of this feels deliberate. Tony's work requires him to constantly compartmentalize violence. To continue functioning, he has to wash his hands psychologically. He has to separate himself from guilt, separate himself from empathy, separate himself from the humanity that would make his actions unbearable. The sign becomes a reminder that his profession demands a kind of moral cleansing after every terrible act, and then gunfire erupts.
The piece wasn't behind the toilet.
Well, this is real life.
No, it's not. This is it.
Tony rushes outside and immediately sees Tony Blundetto murdering Phil Leotardo in broad daylight. All Tony can say is,
I knew this was gonna happen.
from the moment Tony B started acting recklessly, Tony knew a disaster was on the horizon. But instead of acting as a boss, he chose to act like a cousin. Instead of following the rules, he chose to protect family. Now the consequences are catching up to him. Soon after, Tony is chased through the streets by an angry mob. This might be the clearest image to decipher in the entire dream. The crowd represents the criminal world itself. The mob boss is literally being hunted by the mob. Deep down, Tony blames himself for everything that's happened. His failure to stop Tony B has endangered New Jersey, and endangered his own position. The crowd becomes a physical manifestation of that guilt. But there also seems to be imagery similar to Frankenstein during this sequence, showing old-timey men with pitchforks and torches chasing after Tony. I think this further backs up my point that Tony has a general fear of being perceived as a monster to the general public. The dream's climax arrives in the locker room. Tony enters carrying a gun, searching for his old high school coach. This scene contains the emotional core of the entire episode. For years, Tony has buried the possibility that he could have lived an entirely different life, a legitimate life. The coach is a physical embodiment of that road Tony chose not to take. When the coach tells Tony,
I also told you, most likely, you'd take the easy way out.
it cuts deeper than any threat from Phil Leotardo, because Tony knows it's true. Tony spent years convincing himself that becoming a mobster was inevitable, but the coach destroys that excuse. He reminds Tony that there was another option, there was potential, there was a future outside of organised crime, but Tony made a choice to abandon it. The coach's words expose Tony's deepest insecurity, that he knowingly became the worst version of himself. When Tony tries to shoot him, the gun fails. The bullets begin to melt. Nothing works.
You're not prepared.
This is the genius of the scene. Tony can murder rivals. He can silence witnesses. But the one thing Tony cannot do is kill the truth. The coach tells him,
You'll never shut me up.
and that's exactly what the entire dream has been trying to say. Tony is not prepared to face his guilt. He's not prepared to face the consequences of Tony B's actions, and he's certainly not prepared to confront the man he could have been. When Tony finally wakes up, the episode ends with one of the most beautiful exchanges in the entire series. He asks Carmela,
Is it daylight where you are?
on the surface it's sort of a strange question. They're practically in the same place. But emotionally, the question makes perfect sense. Tony isn't asking about daylight. He's asking about hope. He's asking whether Carmela feels just as trapped as Tony does, whether she's carrying the same darkness. It's one of the few genuinely vulnerable moments Tony allows himself in the entire series, and it reveals something important. After everything he's seen in this dream, after all the dead faces, after all the guilt, Tony still reaches for Carmela. Not because she can save him, but because she's the only person who truly understands the burden of the life they've built together. What if the entire episode itself is a dream, not just the 20-minute sequence everyone talks about? I think the only real thing in this episode is the opening sequence, and everything afterwards operates according to dream logic. Tony lies effortlessly about his identity. The transitions become increasingly surreal. Characters appear and disappear without explanation. Even Christopher seems to move through the story in impossible ways. Personally, I don't think David Chase intended the entire episode to be a literal dream, but I do feel like the episode is designed to feel dreamlike even when Tony is awake. Reality and subconscious thought blend together until the audience experiences the same confusion that Tony does, and that's what makes the test dream so special. It's not a puzzle that needs to be solved, it's Tony Soprano's soul putting itself on trial. And by the end of the episode, the verdict is already clear. Tony Soprano knows what he has to do. He's just not ready to do it. Before I wrap this video up, I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone that subscribed, left a like, or a comment on any of my videos. I never imagined when I first created this channel that it would perform as well as it has been, especially so soon. I mean, I literally have a video sat on 60,000 views at the minute, and that's something I never would have dreamed of. If you're still enjoying my content, please make sure to drop some video suggestions in the comments, and I'll be sure to make a video on them. I am currently in the process of making a video essay on the episode Mayhem from season 6 of The Sopranos, and I want to have it up as soon as possible. But thank you so much, everyone, for all the love I've received.